The music was loud, the lights soft, and laughter filled the room as everyone celebrated my sister's wedding. I sat at the family table, trying to enjoy the moment, even though weddings always made me feel a little out of place. My nephew, Elliot, had been sitting beside me the whole time, playing with the napkin and tapping his shoes against the chair. Suddenly, he tugged on my sleeve, his little voice serious as he said, "Aunt, we need to go now." At first, I thought he was tired or maybe wanted to look for his mom, but the urgency in his tone made me pay attention. His wide brown eyes kept darting toward the side of the room. I leaned down, whispering, "Why? What's wrong?" Elliot bit his lip, then slipped down from his chair. "Just come," he said firmly, his small hand wrapping around mine. Without waiting for my answer, he crawled under the long white tablecloth. I hesitated for a second, looking around at the other guests, but nobody seemed to notice us. So I bent down and followed him beneath the table. The ground was cold, and the fabric brushed against my shoulders as I crouched low. Elliot kept moving, pointing toward the end of the table where the cloth lifted just slightly. When I peeked out, my stomach twisted. Just a few feet away, in a dim corner where the shadows were thicker, I saw Gareth, my sister's new husband, leaning close to one of the bridesmaids. At first, I wanted to believe I was wrong, that maybe it was just a hug or something innocent. But then it happened so clearly there was no mistaking it. Gareth pressed his lips against Talia's. It wasn't quick or accidental. It was slow, familiar, like they had done it before. Talia's hand was on his shoulder, and he didn't pull away. I froze, my breath caught in my chest. My nephew's small hand squeezed mine, and I realized he had seen it too. He didn't fully understand what it meant, but even a child knew that a groom kissing someone other than his bride was not right. The sound of clinking glasses and cheers from the reception filled the air, but in that corner, it felt like the world had gone silent. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to move, to say something, but I couldn't. I felt like I was intruding on something that shouldn't even exist. Gareth pulled back slightly, whispering something I couldn't hear, and Talia laughed quietly. They both glanced around before slipping further into the shadows, away from where anyone else might see. I stayed crouched under the table with Elliot, not sure what to do. My hands trembled as the reality hit me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't an accident. On the day of my sister's wedding, while everyone celebrated her happiness, her new husband was already betraying her. Elliot whispered, "Aunt, is he in trouble?" I couldn't answer. My throat felt tight, and tears burned my eyes. All I could do was pull him close and whisper, "Stay quiet, sweetheart." Because deep down, I already knew nothing about this night would ever be the same again. Growing up, people often thought Clara and I were inseparable. We shared a room until high school, borrowed each other's clothes, and whispered secrets late at night. On the surface, we looked like the kind of sisters who would always stand side by side. But inside our home, things were never balanced. Clara was the one who drew everyone's attention. She had an easy smile, hair that always seemed to fall perfectly into place, and the kind of charm that made teachers and neighbors praise her. My mother especially adored her, calling her our sunshine. When Clara walked into a room, it was like the air shifted to make space for her glow. I was different, quieter. I liked books more than parties, kept to myself, and didn't try to compete. People often forgot I was even there until Clara was done shining. I don't think my mother ever meant to push me aside, but it happened in small ways. A compliment that skipped me, a photo where Clara stood in the middle while I was at the edge, a proud smile saved only for her. Even though it stung, I never resented Clara the way some siblings might. If anything, I thought it was my job to make her happy. When she needed me to cover for her, I did it. When she wanted someone to listen, I listened. When she hurt, I felt it too, and I tried to make things easier. It was easier to play the background role than to fight for a spotlight I knew would never be mine. That pattern carried on even as we grew older. Clara had a way of drawing people in, especially men. She dated often, and every time things ended, she'd cry on my shoulder. I would hold her, stroke her hair, and remind her she deserved better, even if I secretly thought she rushed into things too quickly. It wasn't my place to judge. She was my sister, and I loved her. Then came Gareth. He appeared 2 years ago at a family barbecue, tall and confident with a smile that could melt stone. My mother was charmed within minutes, praising his manners, laughing at his jokes, and telling him he felt like part of the family already. Clara's eyes sparkled when she looked at him, and I could tell she was already imagining a future with him. I wanted to be happy for her, and I tried. But something about him never sat right with me. He was smooth, too smooth. His compliments sounded practiced, his charm a little too polished. He remembered everyone's names, laughed at all the right times, and yet, when his eyes met mine, there was something cold behind them. It was a flicker, a sharpness that didn't match the warmth he showed everyone else. I brushed it off at first, convincing myself I was being unfair. After all, Clara looked happier than I'd ever seen her, and the whole family adored him. Still, deep inside me, a small knot formed the first day Gareth walked into our lives, and no matter how hard I tried, it never went away. Elliot's hand was still in mine when we crawled back out from under the table. His face was serious, the way children get when they know something is wrong but don't have the words for it. He tugged at my arm again and whispered, "Uncle Gareth isn't supposed to kiss her, right? He's supposed to kiss Aunt Clara." My heart ached at the innocence in his voice. He wasn't old enough to understand the weight of what we had just seen, but he understood enough to know it was wrong. I squeezed his hand gently and told him to stay close to me. I couldn't bring myself to explain it, not here, not in the middle of the wedding. I sat back at the table, trying to smile as guests laughed and clapped to the music. My mind wasn't on the celebration anymore. It was racing, torn between choices I never thought I'd have to make. Should I stand up right now and stop this? Should I walk over to Clara and tell her what her husband had just done behind her back? Or should I swallow it down, keep quiet, and let the day play out the way everyone expected it to? I looked at Clara, laughing with her friends, the glow of a new bride shining on her face. She looked happy, blissfully happy. She had no idea that her new husband was already breaking vows that hadn't even cooled from being spoken. My chest tightened. How could I tell her? How could I crush her in front of everyone she loved? But how could I not? I thought back to all the years I had put her needs before mine. When she borrowed my clothes and ruined them, I never complained. When she went behind my back and dated someone I had feelings for in college, I let it go because I didn't want to lose her. When she ignored my concerns about Gareth early on, I stayed silent, even though it gnawed at me. I had spent so much of my life putting her happiness above my own. Now, sitting there with my nephew's innocent question echoing in my ears, I felt the weight of it all pressing down on me. Clara had dismissed me so many times before, called me overprotective or jealous whenever I tried to warn her. If I told her now, would she even believe me? Or would she think I was just trying to ruin her day out of spite? The betrayal burned deeper because of that thought. I realized she might have chosen Gareth, even knowing he wasn't what he pretended to be. Maybe the signs were there, and she ignored them because she wanted the picture-perfect life. If that was true, then what I saw wasn't just Gareth betraying her. It was Clara betraying herself, and in a way, betraying me too for never trusting my words. Elliot leaned his head against my arm, waiting quietly. I stared at Clara across the room, my heart twisting. For the first time, I didn't know if protecting her was the right thing to do anymore. The music around me faded into the background as I sat still, my nephew leaning against my side. My eyes followed Clara across the room, her dress shining under the lights, her laughter filling the air. She looked so proud, so sure she had made the right choice. But my mind was no longer in the present. It went back to moments I had pushed away, signs I had noticed but forced myself to bury. One memory came sharp and clear. It was at a family barbecue not long after Gareth first started coming around. Everyone was outside, drinks in hand, music playing from a speaker on the porch. I had gone inside to grab more cups when I overheard him in the kitchen with one of Clara's friends. His tone was low, smooth, too familiar for someone who was supposed to be committed to my sister. I caught pieces of it, him complimenting her dress, saying she looked better than anyone else there. She laughed, brushing him off, but his words stayed with me. When I told Clara later, she didn't even blink. She rolled her eyes, waved her hand like I was being ridiculous, and told me I always looked for problems where there weren't any. Her voice had a sharp edge as she said, "You're just jealous that people like him." That cut me deeper than I wanted to admit. I let it drop, but inside I knew what I had heard. Another memory struck me, even stronger. It was a holiday dinner. The house was crowded, kids running around, and the table full of food. Gareth had left his phone on the counter when he went outside to take a call. I hadn't meant to look, but when the screen lit up, my eyes landed on the message that popped up. The words were suggestive, too bold to mistake for anything innocent. The name wasn't saved in his contacts, just a number, but the way he responded when I picked up the phone to hand it to him told me enough. His eyes flickered, his jaw tight for a moment, before he smiled and thanked me. That night, I tried to tell Clara again. I didn't accuse him harshly. I just said maybe she should pay closer attention, that I didn't trust the way he acted around other women. But instead of hearing me, she lashed out. "You've always had something to say about the men I choose," she snapped. "Maybe it's because no one ever looks at you the way they look at me." I never forgot those words. They stung because they came from her, the sister I had always defended, the person I had put first my whole life. She brushed off my concern and made me feel small, like my only motive was bitterness. Now, sitting there in the reception hall with the image of Gareth kissing Talia burned into my eyes, I felt heat rising in my chest. My blood boiled with a mix of anger and grief. I had been right all along. The signs were there, plain as day, and Clara chose not to see them. She chose not to believe me. And now, on the very night she thought her life was beginning, I couldn't shake the cruel truth. She had walked into this with her eyes closed, and I was left holding the proof of everything I had tried to warn her about. I sat stiff in my chair as the ceremony moved forward, my palms damp against the fabric of my dress. The words spoken by the officiant seemed to echo through the hall, but they barely reached me. All I could think about was what I had just seen, what I now carried inside me. My chest felt heavy, like each breath was harder than the last. Across the room, Gareth stood tall beside Clara, his face full of charm. He smiled at her the way a groom should, eyes locked on her as though she was the only person in the world. To anyone else, he looked like the perfect husband, devoted and steady. But I knew better. I had seen what was behind that mask, and the memory of it clung to me like a weight I couldn't shake. I tried to keep my eyes on my sister, but even then I noticed things I wished I hadn't. Talia stood among the bridesmaids, her lips curved in a faint, private smile. While the rest of them focused on Clara, on the vows and the meaning of the day, Talia's gaze slipped more than once toward Gareth. It wasn't obvious to anyone who wasn't watching closely, but I caught it. The little glance, the smug tilt of her lips, like she carried a secret no one else knew. And Gareth, though he kept his face steady, gave her a quick flick of his eyes in return. My stomach turned as I gripped the edge of my seat. How could Clara not see it? How could everyone be cheering for a love that was already tainted? My sister's voice shook with emotion as she repeated her vows, promising her heart, her trust, her whole life to the man standing in front of her. I wanted to scream, to stand up and stop her, to say that everything she was promising was being given to someone who didn't deserve it. But my throat tightened, and I stayed silent. I thought about all the years behind us, about how Clara never believed me when I tried to warn her. If I spoke now, if I interrupted the vows in front of everyone she loved, would she see it as me protecting her? Or would she see it as me trying to ruin her moment out of jealousy? I could already hear her sharp words in my head, already feel her anger pressing down on me. My hands shook in my lap as Gareth slid the ring onto her finger. The crowd clapped, people stood and cheered, and Clara's face lit up with joy. Everyone around me saw a fairy tale unfolding. I saw a lie binding itself tighter with every second. I swallowed hard, keeping the truth locked inside me, even though it burned to stay there. If I said nothing, Clara's future would be built on broken trust. But if I said something now, in front of all these people, I risked losing her forever. The choice pressed down on me with unbearable weight, and as they shared their first kiss as husband and wife, I sat frozen, knowing either path would change everything. The clinking of glasses rang through the hall as Gareth stood up, holding his champagne flute high. The chatter died down, and all eyes turned to him. He smiled, that polished grin he always wore, and began to speak. "I just want to say," he started, his voice warm and confident, "that today is the happiest day of my life. To stand here with Clara, the most beautiful, loyal, and loving woman I have ever met, fills me with more joy than words can say." The crowd cheered, and Clara beamed at him, her cheeks pink with happiness. I sat still, my hands folded tightly in my lap, my nails digging into my skin. Gareth continued, his words flowing like honey. "Marriage," he said, "is built on loyalty, on trust, and on love that never wavers. I promise to give Clara all of that and more, for the rest of my life." People clapped again, some wiping their eyes. To them, it was perfect. To me, it was poison. My stomach churned with every word he spoke, each one slicing through me, because I knew how false it was. Loyalty, trust, love. He was breaking all three in secret, and yet he stood here speaking as though he were the embodiment of them. I felt my pulse hammer in my throat, the room spinning slightly. And then, as I stared at him, another memory came back, one I had tried to bury for years. Clara, years ago in college. I had been in love then, deeply, with someone I thought cared for me just as much. His name was Mark, and he made me feel seen in a way I wasn't used to. For a while, I believed I had something real. Until the night I found out Clara had been seeing him behind my back. The betrayal was quiet at first, just rumors whispered by friends. Then I caught them myself, her slipping out of his car late at night, his arm brushing hers in a way no one could mistake. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. She said she hadn't meant to hurt me, but that she couldn't help it, that he liked her more. My chest had cracked open that day, but instead of hating her, I swallowed it. I told myself she was my sister, that family mattered more than any boy, and I let the wound sit inside me, never truly healing. Now, sitting at her wedding, hearing her new husband preach about loyalty while sneaking kisses with another woman, that old wound ripped open like it had never closed. It mixed with the fresh betrayal, and I felt the sharp truth hit me all at once. I had stayed silent too many times. I had let Clara's happiness come before my own pain again and again. But not this time. Something inside me snapped. My hands stopped shaking. My decision became clear, as heavy as it was. Clara deserved to know the truth, even if it shattered her. Even if she turned on me again. I could not sit here and let her whole future be built on lies. For the first time that night, I straightened my back, steadying my breath. I knew what I had to do. I rose from my seat before I could second-guess myself. The glass in Gareth's hand was still raised, his smile broad, as if the world truly believed his performance. My voice cut through the room, sharp but trembling at the edges. "Enough," I said, louder than I intended. The clapping stopped. Every head turned toward me. Clara blinked at me from across the room, her face puzzled. "Maribel?" she asked softly, confusion in her tone. My chest tightened, but I forced the words out. "You talk about loyalty, Gareth. About trust. But just an hour ago, under that table over there, Elliot and I saw you kissing Talia." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the faint hum of the music still playing in the background. Clara's smile fell instantly. She stared at me, then at Gareth, then at Talia, as if waiting for someone to tell her it was a bad joke. Gareth let out a laugh, smooth and dismissive. "Maribel, come on," he said, shaking his head. "This is absurd. It's Clara's wedding day. Are you really going to stand up and throw around lies like that?" His voice was calm, but I saw the flicker in his eyes, the panic he was trying to bury. Murmurs spread through the room. Guests shifted uncomfortably, whispering to each other. All eyes slid toward Talia, whose face had gone pale. She tried to look away, but the guilt was already written across her expression. Her forced smile did nothing to hide it. Clara's hand went to her chest, her lips parting as though she couldn't breathe. What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice shaking. Before I could answer, my mother shot up from her seat, her voice sharp. "Maribel, sit down right now. This is not the time or the place. Don't you dare ruin your sister's happiness out of spite." Her eyes burned into me, protective of Clara but blind to the truth. Across the room, Gareth's parents rushed to their feet, trying to calm everyone down. "Let's not jump to conclusions," his mother said quickly, forcing a smile. "I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. Weddings are emotional, people misinterpret things." But the air was already broken. Clara's gaze darted back and forth, her hands trembling, searching Gareth's face for answers. He reached for her, but she pulled back just slightly, doubt seeping into her eyes. And then Elliot's small voice rose above the noise, innocent and steady. "It's true," he said, clutching the edge of my dress. Aunt Maribel saw it too. Uncle Gareth was kissing her. Gasps spread across the hall. The murmuring grew louder, harsher, the weight of 100 eyes pressing down on Gareth and Talia. For a moment, no one moved. Clara's face drained of all color, and I felt my heart twist for her. I hadn't wanted it this way, not in front of everyone, but the truth was out now, and there was no turning it back. Clara's face shifted from confusion to something sharper, her eyes narrowing as she looked straight at me. For a second, I thought she would turn to Gareth and demand the truth, but instead, her voice rose, full of anger. "Of course," she said bitterly. "Of course you would do this, Maribel. You can't stand to see me happy, can you?" The words hit me like a slap. I shook my head, my throat tight. "Clara, no, But she didn't let me finish. Her voice cracked as she went on. "You've done this before. Every time I find someone, you have something to say. You twist things, make it about how they're not good enough. You're jealous, Maribel. You always have been. I stood frozen, the noise of the crowd dimming as her words cut deeper than anything Gareth could have said. I wanted her to see me, to remember who I was, the sister who had always stood by her, who had taken her side even when she was wrong. But in her eyes, I wasn't that. I was the one tearing her life apart in front of everyone she loved. Gareth stepped forward then, placing a steadying hand on Clara's shoulder. His voice was calm, smooth, just the way he knew how to use it. "Clara," he said softly, "I don't know what Maribel thought she saw, but it wasn't what she's saying. Talia and I had too much to drink earlier, and it was a stupid, clumsy moment. Nothing serious. I would never hurt you." He turned to the guests, his expression apologetic. "We've all made mistakes when alcohol's involved. I should have been smarter, but it didn't mean anything." The murmurs in the crowd softened, people nodding as if his excuse made sense. He had them in the palm of his hand, just like he always did. Clara's tears welled, but instead of pulling away from him, she clung to his arm, turning back to me with fire in her eyes. "You just can't stand that he chose me," she spat. "That someone this good, this loving, would want me and not you. You've hated me for it since the beginning." I felt the breath leave my lungs. It wasn't just Gareth betraying her anymore. It was Clara betraying me, once again, choosing to believe his lies over my truth. My chest ached as I looked at her. The same sister I had defended all my life, the same girl I had let hurt me before. And now here she was, standing beside the man who was already breaking her vows, ready to cut me out just to protect him. The room blurred around me, filled with whispers, but all I heard was the sound of my sister's voice echoing in my head. I stood there alone, my hands trembling, realizing that in this moment I had lost her, not to Gareth, not to Talia, but to her own choice. I left the reception that night without another word. My chest burned, but I held my head high as I walked out of the hall. If Clara wanted to believe Gareth over me, then fine. I wasn't going to beg her to see the truth. I wasn't going to stand there and let them humiliate me in front of everyone. But deep inside, I made myself a promise. I would not let him win. Not this time. The weeks that followed were heavy. I avoided Clara, though she sent me short, sharp messages telling me to move on and let things go. I didn't answer. Instead, I kept my distance, watching from the edges of her new married life. But I also paid attention. I had learned long ago that men like Gareth always left cracks in their perfect facades. It didn't take long. One evening, while driving home from work, I spotted him near the city center. He wasn't with Clara. He was with Talia. They weren't careful. They walked too close, laughed too freely, and when they thought no one was looking, they slipped into a hotel together. I sat in my car for a long moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel. The sight of them burned into my eyes. I knew then what I had to do. I hired a private investigator, someone who could do what I couldn't. Over the next several weeks, he collected what I needed: photos of Gareth and Talia entering hotels, receipts from dinners paid in cash, timelines of meetings that didn't match the stories Gareth told Clara. Piece by piece, the mask Gareth wore began to crumble, and soon I held the proof no one could deny. I waited. I didn't rush to Clara with the evidence. I wanted the right moment, one where she couldn't twist my words or accuse me of jealousy. That moment came a few months later, when our parents invited everyone to dinner. Clara and Gareth walked in together, smiling like nothing had ever happened. I sat quietly, waiting until we were all seated around the table. When the food was served and the small talk faded, I placed a folder on the table. The room grew still. My mother frowned, my father leaned back in his chair, and Clara gave me a wary look. Gareth's smile faltered the second he saw the papers. "I'm not here to argue," I said calmly. "I'm here with the truth. The kind you can't ignore anymore." I slid the photos across the table, Gareth and Talia entering hotels, their hands tangled, their faces close. Then the receipts, the timelines, each one showing the life he was living behind Clara's back. My sister's hands trembled as she flipped through them, her face draining of color with every page. For once, Gareth didn't have the right words. He stammered, tried to twist it into lies, but the evidence was too much. Clara looked at him, tears in her eyes, and for the first time, she saw him as I had always seen him. His family shifted uncomfortably, whispering excuses, but even they couldn't defend him now. The mask Gareth wore shattered right there at our family table, and I sat in silence, finally holding the power he had tried to take from me. Clara didn't leave Gareth that night, not right away. She sat at the table, pale and trembling, clutching the folder of evidence as if it were a lifeline and a weight at the same time. Gareth tried to smooth things over in the weeks that followed, but the cracks were too deep. Within months, their marriage was nothing more than arguments, silences, and excuses. Finally, she packed her things and went back to our parents' house, her dream of a perfect life slipping through her fingers. One evening, she came to me. Her eyes were red, her voice hoarse from crying. "You were right," she said, barely above a whisper. "I should have listened to you. I wanted those words for so long. I thought they might heal something in me. But hearing them now, after everything, didn't feel like victory. It felt hollow. The truth was, I had been right all along, and still she had chosen him over me. She had stood in front of me, defended him, and called me jealous while I bled inside. Her regret came too late, and though part of me still loved her, another part had hardened. I nodded, but I didn't comfort her. Not the way I used to. I realized then that I couldn't keep pouring myself into a bond that was always one-sided. I had given Clara loyalty all my life, even when it hurt me, and in return, she had never trusted me when it mattered most. So I chose to let go. Not with anger, not with revenge anymore, but with quiet peace. I didn't yell, I didn't argue. I simply stepped back from her world. We still saw each other at family gatherings, polite and distant, but I stopped trying to be the sister who carried all the weight. The only one who stayed close was Elliot. He would visit me on weekends, his small backpack slung over his shoulders, and he'd curl up on my couch while I read him stories. He never brought up the wedding, but sometimes he'd slip his hand into mine and say, "I'm glad you told the truth, Aunt Maribel." Those moments reminded me that innocence often sees clearer than adults ever can. Looking back, I realized something I wished I'd known sooner. Betrayal doesn't always come from the strangers you welcome into your life. Sometimes it comes from the people you'd lay yourself down for, the ones you trust to protect you as fiercely as you protect them. Clara hadn't just lost a husband. She had lost me too, because she never believed in me when it mattered most. As I sat on my porch one quiet evening, watching Elliot chase fireflies in the yard, I breathed easier than I had in years. I had lost a sister's trust, but I had kept my own peace. And I understood at last. Sometimes the deepest betrayals don't come from lovers. They come from the people you die for without hesitation.